Jets should call Minnesota for Kirk Cousins, like right now. Like right now.
Go get Kirk Cousins.
While they're done.
With falling to 0-2, a lot of people are saying that the Minnesota Vikings season is over. And in today's video, I'm going to go into in-depth detail on whether that is true or not. So to start it off, what are the Vikings up against? And since 1970, there's under a 10% chance of an 0-2 team making the playoffs. And out of the 406 teams, only 3 of them have won the Super Bowl. And while this is really good detail, 100% facts, it doesn't show you the complete picture. First, I'm going to tell you why the Vikings are still alive, and then the second part of the video, I'm going to tell you why they might be dead. First off, the under 10% data is old. You know, it does go back to 1970, and things have quite simply changed. There are more playoff teams than there used to, and there are more games. So both of these make 0-2 mean less. And we can see this going back to just last year. The Cincinnati Bengals went 0-2, and then they went on fire, and they ended up 12-4. And the start for the Bengals was even worse than the start for the Vikings because the Bengals lost to the Steelers, so it was a divisional game, which matters so much more. So of course, that is another upside of the Vikings' 0-2 start, is that neither of them were 2 division rivals. If they put it together and are able to go 6-0 in the division, then they could easily be in the driver's seat to get a home playoff game. The second reason why the Vikings should still have some hope is that they are in the NFC, which going into the season and as of now, we still think of the NFC as being much weaker than the AFC, largely due to the quarterbacks. So if the Vikings can find a way to go 9-8, they have a very solid chance at a wild card slot. And when looking at their schedule, for the Vikings to get to 9-8, they really just need to win some divisional games. So you can throw this out the window. If they can beat the Bears, the Packers, and the Lions, which does seem a little unlikely at the moment, but if they're able to do that, then they're looking good. The third reason why the Vikings are still in it is, of course, Justin Jefferson. So he's the best wide receiver in football, and it's shown. You can see this as a good thing or a bad thing, but Justin Jefferson has 309 yards on the season so far through 2 games. The rest of the Minnesota offense has 434 yards. So Justin Jefferson himself makes up 42% of the total offense. And if you have a player that is that great, then he can win you several games on his own. And Jordan Addison has looked very promising with 2 touchdowns already just through 2 games, so they could become another deadly wide receiver duo in the NFL. The fourth bright spot in the Vikings season has been Kirk Cousins. So it hasn't been all great. He has had a lot of turnovers on the year, with 3 fumbles over the first 2 games. But he has stood strong in the pocket and has played very well. If you watch the games, Kirk Cousins is not the reason they're losing largely, especially not the reason why they lost to the Eagles, because he had a very good game. He played better than Jalen Hurts in that game. If you swap the quarterbacks, the Eagles still win. And I'm not saying he's elite, but he is around the 10th best quarterback in the NFL, which could lead your team to the playoffs, especially when combined with the best wide receiver. And the last ray of hope for the Vikings is that their defense has improved when compared to last year. I know last year they were the worst defense in the NFL, but they have had significant improvement. Even after the Vikings fumbling twice in week 1, their defense was able to hold the Buccaneers to just 20 points. And then last week, even more so, after 4 fumbles in the game, the Eagles only scored 34 points. Now I do know 34 points, it's a lot of points, and if you watched it, the Eagles just ran the ball straight down the field, essentially running the same exact run play right down the middle every single time, and they got like 5 yards each, and it was kind of funny. But without those 4 fumbles, the Vikings defense holds the Eagles well under 20 points. In the first half of the game, the defense was holding up really strong until it just became too much. So through 2 games, if the Vikings just didn't have those 6 fumbles, they would be 2-0 probably, and they would be well on their way to the playoffs. But that's easier to say than it is to do, and they could very well continue with their turnovers and fall apart. If you made it this far into the video, please consider liking and subscribing. So now for the thunderclouds to come down and for the negative outlook on the Vikings season. First off, there is, as I mentioned earlier, the under 10% chance of an 0-2 team making the playoffs. This gets much worse when you look at their schedule. So they're 0-2. Next week, in week 3, they play the Chargers. Then, in week 5, they play the Chiefs. In week 6, they play the 49ers. And in week 7, they play the Packers, who have looked good through the first week. The Vikings could very easily get to 2-5 or even 2-6 because they're just playing some good teams. And I just don't think they can beat the Chargers. I don't think they can beat the Chiefs or the 49ers for sure. So that's 3 more almost guaranteed losses. So outside of those games, they really have to go almost perfect. And of course, if they go 2-5, the rumors of trading Kirk Cousins, which are pretty crazy for a team that was so good last year, but the rumors of trading your starting quarterback are just going to keep on going. ESPN loves the Jets, and it's going to be an everyday conversation until either he gets traded or the Vikings get better. The second biggest problem with the Minnesota Vikings is that their offensive line is bad. Going into the season, a lot of people thought it was improved. Last year it was bad, and they were like, maybe it will be slightly above average this year. Well, it's not. It's bad, and it's hurt. So it went from bad to worse. In week 1, they let up 3 sacks and 9 quarterback hits. And in week 2, they let up 2 sacks and 10 quarterback hits. So Kirk Cousins is getting absolutely crushed. Lucky for the Vikings, Kirk Cousins never gets hurt. But with a guy in his 30s, pretty old, getting hit this much, and if you saw the Netflix documentary, you know how much it hurts him, there's a chance he could get hurt. And if he gets hurt, the Vikings are just completely dead. And of course, this is not something you can really fix. There aren't any good offensive linemen out there on the market to pick up. You can't trade for one because everyone needs them. So you're kind of stuck with a bad offensive line. And then to make things worse, your team has no run game. So far, they've averaged about 35 rushing yards per game. Not per quarter or per half of a game. Per full game, they have averaged 35 rushing yards. So this means Kirk Cousins has had to do absolutely everything behind the bad offensive line and essentially only throwing to one man. And then finally, of course, the Vikings were so good last year. They had everything go right for them during the regular season. When you go 13-4 with a negative point differential, that means you won absolutely every close game. And that hasn't happened so far this year. They've already lost 2 one-score games. It just kind of seems like things bounced their way pretty frequently last year, and they're just not this year. And even if they do cut down on their fumbles with 6th in the year, so they could just throw more interceptions, and then they'll still have to deal with a bunch of turnovers. And while the defense does look improved, it is still pretty worrying because the Eagles might have exposed them, showing that you can just run up the middle every single time. If they keep on doing this, the Lions will do it, the 49ers will do it, and several other teams will just run the ball, and the Vikings might not be able to do anything about it because their personnel is just not good at stopping the run. So overall, I don't think the season's done for the Vikings. I don't think you should trade Kirk Cousins, but I do think they need to find a way to make it to 3-4. And this would have them probably beating the Panthers and the Bears, and then beating one of the Chargers, Chiefs, or 49ers. This will be a tough battle, and I don't know if it's possible, but they need to find a way to do that. And if they're at 2-5 or worse, then maybe it is time to trade Kirk and just give up on the year. But I hope you enjoyed my video. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you later.